begin the episode on the holodeck, but don't worry as we won't be here for long. The Doctor appears in an American garage circa 1960 and, wishing to gain the attention of whoever's under the car, pops its horn. It's Paris, of course. He's been ignoring his training in sickbay so he can arse around on the holodeck because Tom Paris is a dick. He agrees to restart his training at some nebulously undefined point in the future before their conversation is overruled by a call to the bridge. As an aside, how sad must this guy be? His job is basically fly the ship unless it's going to involve some skill, then get out of the way because you're not as good at it. Utterly savage. He's been called because we've detected a science wibbly in front of us. An alien ship wibbles into existence and we have a closer look. Paris tells us that it seems to have a V8 warp drive, a special theoretical superdrive that can fold space to travel great distances instantly. After the last time, you'd think he'd want to steer clear of such things. Tuvok warns us it's unstable and probably going to kaboom, which is a problem, as Paris thinks that V8 warp thing going pop could kaboom everything in the vicinity, which means them. Janeway turns the mood lighting on while we try to find a solution. The ship isn't picking up when we try to call them, and we can't teleport them out because science reasons, but we're having a Paris episode, so he's got the solution. Voyager can make a warp wibbly that'll counteract the alien warp wibbly. With only a relatively small chance that they'll all die, Janeway agrees. The wibblies unwibble each other and everything is fine, so it's time for a chat with whoever we just saved. He's fine, but his ship isn't, so we offer to help with repairs. As it looks like they'll be around for a while, let's see what the fates decide for a name. Alien pilot's new name is... Crewman McCrewface, volunteered by Ensign Cleaner 1J. Crewman McCrewface teleports over to thank us properly. He apologises for us needing to rescue him, and we learn that his V8 warp drive is a test unit that he pushed too far. He's also now about 20 light years from home, so if we can't help him fix it, he'll be flying for a while. Maybe Paris can help out. He visits Chakotay to ask about being reassigned to the repairs, warp drives being a fascination of his. Unfortunately, Chakotay's reading a report from the Doctor about how Paris doesn't turn up for training in sickbay. Chakotay wants to know if there's an issue, concerned that he's regressing to the slightly more dickish ways of his past. Paris seems to take the hint and says he'll report to sickbay rather than help with repairs. The effort is enough to convince Chakotay, who rewards him by telling him to go and help with the repairs he wanted instead. On Crewman McCrewface's ship, he and Paris are talking about test flights and the follies of youth. As Paris recounts stealing his dad's shuttle, Crewman McCrewface has some sort of face wibbly where they turn into a completely different alien. A bit of a panic ensues, but they manage to switch back before Paris notices. Are we dealing with a changeling? The conversation continues with Crewman McCrewface extolling the virtues of being a test pilot, flying around constantly in ever new and more interesting ships with exotic women at each stop, so I'm guessing this is the episode where Paris has his midlife crisis. It would be appropriate, as we're about halfway through the show. The conversation is derailed for a moment while we look at the gizmo that makes space folding possible, the heart of McCrewface's V8 warp drive. He's determined to get it working again, mentioning his aversion to settling down. You know, that thing Paris has done and is now straining against. Straining so much, in fact, that he's tempted when Crewman McCrewface offers for Paris to join him in testing a new ship when he gets this one back. He could meet up with Voyager afterwards. The temptation fades and Paris explains he has responsibilities, not least of which to B'Elanna, who he now remembers he was supposed to meet for lunch. Arriving to find her finished, he apologises and explains he was helping with repairs. The problem is, it's part of a running theme with him lately. He's been cancelling dates and spending more and more time on the holodeck. He escalates the whole thing into an argument when she tries to find out if something's wrong, so naturally Neelix wants to stick his oar in. They do the smart thing and ignore him until B'Elanna has had her fill and disengages, leaving a frustrated Paris and an awkward Neelix. Back on Crewman McCrewface's ship, some more face wibblies hammer home the point that something weird is going on, something perhaps linked to his desire for constant motion. He asks the computer about his genetic makeup and how long it will take for him to revert to his previous form. Whatever's going on, it'll be happening for realsies in about 3 hours. Maybe it won't be our problem by then. Paris has thought of a solution to the V8 warp wibblies, and one based on old tech, so we go to his holodeck garage to discuss it. Crewman McCrewface, despite being initially skeptical, is eventually convinced by the idea before telling Paris he has things sweet here on Voyager, that he has rigid structure and no surprises, that things are just so wholesomely orderly here. For the amount of hustles Paris has pulled, I'm a little surprised he can't tell he's getting played. As Paris dicks about under the bonnet of his holocar, Crewman McCrewface has another bout of being Crewman McDifferentface, but manages to pull things back under control again before it's noticed. McCrewface repeats the offer of Paris joining him for that test ride before leaving with one of Paris's tools for some reason. Perhaps McDifferentface is the hide to McCrewface's jackal. Or maybe they're both bastards. Crewman McCrewface visits the cargo bay to discreetly access a terminal. He wants all of the data on Paris and waves a gizmo when the computer asks for authorization. As it downloads, Seven enters because he's picked the cargo bay that Voyager is still using to house her instead of giving her crew quarters. She wants to know what the fuck he's playing at, and she's precisely the wrong person for him to try and distract with flattery. He does at least manage to prevent her from reporting his activity by pretending he was working with Paris, and says he'll go and report to him. Crewman McCrewface's repairs are complete, and Paris is just finishing up. As he tidies away his shit, he discovers the spanner that went missing earlier. McCrewface explains that he needed it to perform some tests. There was enough genetic material on it to check if humans are compatible, and it turns out they are. As Crewman McCrewface grabs Paris by the throat, wibbly things happen and they swap appearances before some green is pooped on the body-swapped Paris. Up on Voyager's bridge, Crewman McParisface arrives for duty just in time to watch the alien ship disappear before taking his place at the controls. Later, Crewman McParisface is trying to adapt to a life around others who know the person he's pretending to be. A misstep or two with Chakotay is something he can get away with, but now he needs to learn where everything is on Voyager. Which is why he's looking for sick bay on ship schematics, which are completely different to both sets of Intrepid-class schematics I've seen, incidentally, when Kim arrives to ask what he's doing. He's on safe footing here at least. Kim won't be able to detect a change in personality because he doesn't know what one is. Crewman McParisface strikes gold with the Doctor, though. After fucking things up a couple of times, he turns on the smarm and explains that he can never be anywhere near as good a medical practitioner as the Doc. The fawning nature plugs straight into our Doctor's ego and all is immediately forgiven. In fact, he's given the rest of the day off to deal with the clear case of inferiority complex that he's been grappling with. Any self-congratulation will have to wait, as he's about to face a real challenge. B'Elanna isn't the sort of person who'll just accept Paris as empty platitudes as, oh, well, fuck me then, I guess. On the alien ship, Body Swap Paris awakes to wonder what the bloody hell is going on. Personally, if I was playing body swap games, I'd probably make sure the victim couldn't wake up, but maybe there's a good reason. Body Swap Paris tries to pull a U-turn and get back to Voyager, only to find that special V8 warp drive has been locked. Even worse, he's appeared in an area of space populated by a species that Crewman McCrewface previously pissed off, and he's being taken into custody. Except no, he's not, because another ship arrives and poops yellow at the ones trying to arrest Body Swap Paris. After they scarper, a familiar-looking alien teleports over and points a gun at Body Swap Paris. She's the other face that Crewman McCrewface kept changing into earlier in the episode, and she's here for a little revenge. Except she's a he, because the body that Body Swap Paris is currently wearing is the one Crewman McCrewface took from him. Looks like it's body swaps all the way down. Body Swap Paris explains that they're both in the same boat, and the person who's responsible for all of these shenanigans is the one they should be after. Speaking of which, Crewman McParisface is trying to lure B'Elanna to an island on a planet they're orbiting, with the promise of a delightful picnic. He doesn't have permission for this, of course, and as B'Elanna points this out, he throws a hissy fit and stomps off. Living life constrained by rules is proving harder than he thought. Which is why he ends up in the mess hall sampling different types of booze from the replicator. Seven arrives to ask why he missed an appointment in the cargo bay and notices he's half cut. Oh, and why is he reading the captain's personal logs? He denies this, but Seven is the wrong person to try and gaslight. It fails, and he instead threatens her. Sadly, she resists the urge to break his nose and instead leaves. Perhaps it's time for Crewman McParisface to consider moving on. That might not be an option. Janeway calls him to her ready room. She's had a report from Seven about him drinking on duty, and as he denies it, tells him to shut the fuck up as she's checked the computer logs that prove he was replicating booze. And it's not just Seven. Janeway's had reports from multiple people about Crewman McParisface's behaviour, which is why she's ordering him to the sick bay for tests. To say that idea is received poorly is an understatement, and Tuvok on the bridge hears her call for security. He arrives to find crewman McParis trying to throttle her and poops yellow on him. Janeway orders him to the sickbay with a guard while tests are run. And the noose is closing in more ways than one. Body Swap Paris is working with the alien whose body he's wearing to get that V8 warp engine working again. Once we get back to Voyager, we'll see if crewman McParis can reverse all these swaps and set things right. Or perhaps not. He's in sickbay on Voyager and has been treated for getting pooped at, but the doc can't wake him. He's found some odd science things in his blood, parts of a second DNA sequence, and thinks it might be a virus of some kind. Maybe that's responsible for his behaviour. The truth arrives in front of Voyager with a wibble. Body Swap Paris and his ally on board call Voyager and let them know what's happened. But Janeway is dismissive of it, and instead orders them to be held in a tractor beam while she goes to sickbay. What curiously un-Janeway-like behaviour, almost as if she's somebody else. Down in the docking bay, Seven's fiddling about in a shuttle we're adding our own V8 warp drive to. Janeway arrives and poops yellow on her because she's really the alien, of course. We'll deal with why that's bullshit in a moment, but let's see how this plays out first. Kim detects a shuttle launch and Chakotay doesn't know what to do, so calls the V8 warp ship. Body Swap Paris tells him to remove the tractor beam so he can catch the shuttle, proving it by repeating what Chakotay said to him about turning his life around earlier in the episode. Chakotay relents and Body Swap Paris goes after crewman McJaneway. We catch them and pooping ensues, but the V8 ship isn't a match for one of Voyager's shuttles. As crewman McJaneway is about to escape, Body Swap Paris remembers the gizmo he added to the V8 engine to make it work and targets that part of the shuttle. Pooping out a green triangle bollockses up the shuttle and prevents it from escaping as crewman McJaneway surrenders. Back on Voyager, the doc figures out how to do body swap shenanigans on his own and switches everyone back. Crewman McCrewface goes back to the body he swapped with the alien ally Paris made and is taken away to see if they can track all the victims he's done this to previously. After they depart, Paris goes back to the holodeck for a little more dicking around with that car, only this time he takes B'Elanna with him to show her the result. And, to be fair to him, he admits that the time spent tinkering with it would have been better spent with B'Elanna, because Tom Paris is sorry for being a dick. They climb inside Paris's idea of the most romantic setting in human history and start necking as we fly away. Okay, first things first, I called bullshit on the Janeway body swap, so let's explain that. When Tuvok pops in and opens fire, I thought to myself, I wonder if this is another swap, but dismissed it. Why? Because we saw previously that the swap affects only the biological appearance of the participants and not the clothing. Why does that matter? Because Janeway was still wearing her captain's pips. Details matter, and the idea that crewman McCrewface swapped them over mid-choke is one that I refuse to accept. And it's a plot hole that would have been so easily fixed, too. Pips getting knocked off by the strangulation would have been a perfectly reasonable explanation. Her hand covering it in a throat-rubbing motion would have solved it. Instead, it's on clear display. I've tried to be more forgiving of plot holes in episodes of late, but this one rubbed me the wrong way. If your main plot device is body swaps, that's the one thing you absolutely have to get right. Beyond that, we have a fairly middling episode. There's another nod to Paris wrestling with his dickishness, which I always like to see, but nothing much else besides that. And I imagine we'll have forgotten the massively overpowered space-folding tech by the next story, and will never mention it again. End of episode.
So, how long do you think this'll take?
That depends.
On what?
Their intentions.
What do you mean by that?
Well, if they are genuinely trying to fix this, then I'd imagine, from our perspective, it'll take a couple of weeks. That's assuming they don't screw it up, of course.
Wait a minute, why wouldn't they be genuine?
If, on the other hand, they've already pulled the plug, and what we're experiencing now is just the last dying gasps of our minds, before we fade into oblivion, then I suspect the time will be entirely subjective.
Well, you're a barrel of laughs, aren't you? I think I'm starting to see why they fetched those pitchforks. Woof.